Hello all, welcome. Thank you for joining TÜVSÜD's complimentary webinar today titled The EU AI Act's Impact on U.S. Businesses, How ISO IEC 42001 Artificial Intelligence Management System Creates an Advantage. This session today is presented by Ali, our Global Product Portfolio Manager for Cybersecurity and AI Certification, and Dr. Ibram, our AI Quality Lead at TÜVSÜD. Before we begin the presentation today, we have a few housekeeping rules. If you or someone you know is having connection issues, please connect through LAN instead of Wi-Fi if available for better connectivity. Also, please view this webinar through the recommended browsers of Chrome, Edge, or Firefox if available. And all participants today are muted to avoid any background noise during the webinar. For the questions and answers portion of today's session, please submit your questions online via the Q&A tab on your screen. And we have a short survey to gather your feedback regarding today's session. Please stay on for a few minutes to answer these short survey questions. We truly appreciate your comments and feedback. Today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be available if you missed any portion of today's session. Now, let me introduce TÜVSÜD today, as well as our session. TÜVSÜD is world-renowned for providing international testing, assessment, training, and certification services. For over 160 years, with offices in over 1,000 locations in 50 countries and represented by approximately 30,000 employees. As a global leader in management system certification, validation, and verification audits, TÜVSÜD's extensive industry experience and expertise elevate the management systems of our clients through our unique approach towards audits. TÜVSÜD assists companies of all sizes with a tailored audit approach, specific to your company's size and industry. We can support you with various ISO-based management system standards, sustainability, cybersecurity, as well as customized audit solutions, and of course, assisting your company with ISO IEC 42001 Artificial Intelligent Management System certification. If you are looking for a trusted, globally recognized provider that is responsive to assist with your company's transformation and certification needs, TÜVSÜD is your partner. And now a little bit more about our session today. During this session, you will learn about the EU AI Act as the world's first comprehensive AI regulatory framework, setting a risk-based model with far-reaching implications for global businesses. Complementing this, ISO IEC 42001 establishes the first international management system standard for AI, offering practical tools to align innovation with compliance. Effective AI governance is not only a compliance requirement, but also a driver of trust, resilience, and market growth. Today, you will also learn about the EU AI Act's impact on businesses in the Americas, why AI governance matters, the importance of ISO IEC 42001 Artificial Intelligence Management System certification, and AI training programs offered by our TÜVSÜD Academy. Before we start today, we have a few polling questions. Please answer these questions. Which industry best represents your company? Is it automotive and mobility, industrial machinery, oil and gas energy, medical devices and healthcare, or consumer electronics? We'll give you a few seconds here to answer. Just trying to understand our audience. Thank you again for joining today. Do we have the results? Okay, industrial machinery, oil and gas are are similar. We have medical devices and healthcare at 75%, consumer electronics 3.1%. Very interesting. Okay, awesome. Okay, one more polling question. Are you interested in ISO IEC 42001 certification or training for yourself or your teams? Yes, or possibly not at this time. Please take a couple minutes. Okay, yes, 7.1%. Yes, interested in training, 7.1%, possibly learning more, 28.6%, and not at this time, 57%. Okay, well, thank you so much for participating in our polling and joining our session today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ali and Ibram. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you, Susan. Hello also from my side. Thanks for joining us today. Good morning, afternoon, evening for you, wherever you are. I am extremely glad today to be your host, at least for the first part, and obviously telling you a little bit on the topic of AI governance and the EU AI Act and how does this impact the US business. So let's kick things off. Obviously, AI is transforming the industries, right? But to be honest, it is not without its hurdles. The question is, how do we innovate responsibly? First, if you have a look, for instance, at the ethics topic, if AI makes a biased decision, obviously trust disappears. So we need systems that are fair from the ground up. Same things apply for transparency requirement. If we cannot explain how the AI made a decision or basically reach out a conclusion, how can we rely on it? Data security, data privacy, these are also important topics that are quite interplaying with the AI field, with the AI topic in general. And we have also what we call the change management necessary for making sure that AI fits into the existing workflows and structures that we have within our organizations. And finally, there is the regulatory pressure. So we see a lot of regulations popping up here and there. And obviously, if you are not keeping the pace, then obviously you are left behind. Now, here is the good news. Industries are finding smart solutions to deal with that. For instance, HR teams are using bias detection mechanisms for their chatbots to make them fairer when making decisions. Hospitals are adopting explainable AI so that they enable their doctors, their staff to understand better what the AI models have made in terms of decisions and what kind of conclusions basically were made and based on which criteria. Federated learning is something that obviously different organizations, especially in the financial sector, are using for preserving privacy and data security. So what I want to say here is that when we meet these challenges heads on with innovation, AI becomes not just powerful, but also trustworthy, transparent, and a driver for a real lasting progress. How exactly this is supposed to be done? This is obviously the question here. And the answer is very simple. It is a set of processes, mechanisms, and policies that you need to implement in your organizations to make sure that this aspect of transparency, of reliability, of trustworthiness is basically fulfilled by your AI systems and within your AI projects. And this is exactly the definition of AI governance. The set of processes, policies, and mechanisms is what we call AI governance. And this topic, we see now how the market is growing. It's indeed exploding. Obviously, you see the numbers here in the slide. It will hit around 3.5 billion with an annual growth from 30 to 40% by the year 2030. And that's a sign of a booming industry, obviously driven by urgent needs. Why? Because as AI becomes more powerful, the organization cannot afford to deploy it without this solid governance framework that we have mentioned, these policies, these processes, these mechanisms. And here is the kicker. For instance, for venture capital firms, now they require evidence of AI governance before they fund AI startups or scale-ups. So no governance plan, obviously no investment. The opportunity here is in just only about building AI, it's about building safe, explainable, compliant, and reliable AI. And companies that get the governance aspect right aren't just going to survive, but they are supposed to prevail. So let's have a look now at the topic from another perspective. We have looked at the organization level, so of this technology. Let's have a look at it from the geopolitical perspective. So it is a fact that AI is not just shaping the technology, but also reshaping the policy and the legal world. How is the case? If you look at basically the graphs that you see here in the slide are extracted from the Stanford University AI Index from this year, so 25, and it tells a clear story. Governments are moving fast, and they are moving fast to regulate AI. On the world map, you can see which countries have passed AI-related bills between 16 and 24. So at obviously the left side graph. And here the darker blue means more legislations. And here we see that the United States is leading the pack with around 27 bills in that time frame, closely followed by Portugal and Russia. But when we focus on the specific year of 24 that you see on the right side, you see that Russia passed the most AI-related laws in this year, so around 7, and then obviously Belgium and Portugal are on its heels. What does this at the end mean? It means that there is indeed a global race, not just to adopt AI, but also to govern it. So it is part of what we call right now this arms race. Let's say for AI, governance is indeed part of it. So for organizations and innovators, this is kind of a double-edged sword. More regulations, means more compliance work to do, right? But it also creates a clearer framework that can basically build public trust and open markets. And this is basically the credo or the mantra for the European Union in this regard. So the takeaway here is that the governance is no longer optional. It's a global movement. The pace is accelerating, and companies that anticipate and adapt to these changes will be positioned not just to comply, but also to lead. Having mentioned the geopolitical aspect, let's start to map it a little bit in a more friendlier way for visualization, if you will. So if you look here at the graph, we try to position the approaches in terms of governance that every country, let's say, has adopted to regulate and govern AI. If we have a look at the first quadrant from the right, where basically we see EU, Canada, South Korea, and Brazil, they have opted for what we call kind of horizontal, kind of strict regulation. And here, when we are looking at the graph, it is important to differentiate the two aspects that we try to use here in terms of positioning these approaches. And here, the first axis, so the y-axis, is how horizontal or how vertical or sectorial this regulation approach is. Do we have a single legal text that is valid for all AIs, or we have legal texts that are specifically dedicated for specific vectors and sectors? The x-axis, and that is the second aspect, is how lenient or how strict this regulation is. And obviously, we try to use this to cluster these approaches. Again, back to our first quadrant, we have European Union in the lead there. And obviously, this is a horizontal approach and kind of strict because we have a set of requirements to be fulfilled that we have a look at in short. And few of the other countries that you see here, like South Korea, Brazil, and Canada, followed on the steps of the EU, since it is the first pioneering legal text, let's say, that was dedicated for AI regulation. China, on the other hand, if you look at the quadrant below, opted for a kind of different hybrid approach. It's a more sectoral one, meaning that they have dedicated regulations for AI systems within specific sectors or verticals. For example, AI in automotive, AI in medical device manufacturing, AI in financial, or based on the technology family of the AI system, of if it is generative AI model, if it is computer vision model, if it is standard machine learning model. So they have dedicated legal texts to regulate these kind of vertical, and this is why it's sectoral one. There are also other countries who opted for different approaches, like you see here on the left side of the graph. But what is interesting for us here to discuss today is where is the US in this? And the answer, as always, the US is kind of singing a little bit out of the core. How come? Let's have a quick look at the situation. Obviously, on federal level, we don't have yet any regulation that is dedicated to AI governance or regulation for the United States of America. Not yet. So there have been different initiatives, different bills discussed, but officially at this time of point, we don't have this. But if we look at state level, we see a lot of initiatives that are really, really ambitious, and they are also different in terms of maturity, in terms of strictness, in terms of approach. And here we should mention that concerning the federal level, there was indeed an executive order from the Biden administration issued in 23 to govern and regulate the AI usage deployment within federal agencies, but this has been revoked by Trump administration in early 25. Still, this does not mean that the US is not into the topic. Actually, kind of the opposite or the contrary, because we see, for instance, that NIST is leading the pack in terms of artifacts, in terms of basically driving the topic of AI governance in general with its AI risk framework, for instance, and the different publications, artifacts that they are releasing. But we see also that, for example, ANSI is leading also the ISO SC42 subcommittee for AI standardization within the ISO organization, and they are basically on the lead there. So this does not mean that the US is not into that. As I mentioned, it's actually the contrary. Having yet went over the situation in the United States, let's switch a bit the topic towards the European Union and have a little bit of kind of a deep dive, if you want, on the EU AI Act topic. And then obviously we can hopefully close the loop at the end of the chapter. So what is the EU AI Act? As we have mentioned, it's a horizontal regulation approach. And it consists of a single piece of legislation, so a single law, that is dedicated to any AI, regardless of where this AI is implemented or deployed. So regardless of the context of the use case, of the system, of the vertical, of the industry, the law applies to all AIs, without kind of differentiation, if you want. How or at which level this differentiation would actually take place? It's rather the level of risk associated with the AI system. So we have in the AI Act 4 levels of criticality, if you want, or of risks. And these level of risks are associated with a set of requirements that needs to be fulfilled in accordance with the risk that is represented or associated with these systems. Then we have also an important aspect for the EU Act that is an NLF framework. What does this mean? Probably some of you would know the CE marking, for instance, from the European Union. And this is basically a mechanism to make sure that products are freely moving through the borders of the European Union. And the EU Act is part of this legislation framework. What does this really mean? It means that the essential requirements are defined on the legal text. So you have principles, high-level principles defined on the legal text, but the details, the technical details for the operationalization of this legal text of this law would take place at standard level. And this is why standards are very, very important for the law. And this is why also TÜV is and will be definitely part of these standardization committees. I personally am sitting in these committees, and we try to shape up these standards to back up the law, obviously mirroring the way how we as an organization, we see AI governance be implemented. So if you have later any questions on this regard, I would be happy to elaborate a bit on the standardization efforts now that are going on for the EU Act, and how does this relate, for instance, with the standardization committees of ISO SC 42, of IEEE, of the UN, obviously, where I'm also part of these committees. Let's have a look now at the repercussions of this law, or what we are supposed to expect. Obviously, there are penalties, and probably most of you would remember GDPR back in 2018 and how much this impacted the market. The EU Act is potentially having a comparable impact, potentially even more, because when we look at the top max, let's say, penalty associated with the law, it could reach around 7% of global turnover of an organization. And this is a significant number, because if you compare it to the GDPR, that is around 4%, it's almost the double. So it is indeed an impactful law if you want to access the European market. Obviously, there are different levels of criticalities here also associated with the penalties. So up to 3% if you have, problems with GDPR requirements, transparency, and so on. And if you have misleading, incorrect information in your conformity assessment procedure, then you would expect around 1% of your annual turnover. So it is indeed significant, and it could have also an important impact on organizations, as I mentioned, that are willing to access, or they are already accessing the European market. Let's have a look now at the risk levels that we have mentioned. How exactly this classification categorization of the EU Act is designed. First, we have the first level that are everything prohibited within the EU. So these kind of use cases are not allowed to be deployed within the EU or brought to market in the EU. And these are everything that have like a manipulative or something affecting or impacting, persons in terms of their health, human rights, and safety and security. For example, social scoring or real-time biometric identification. Then we have high-risk systems, and these are critical, let's say, AI systems, if they are developed or implemented under these kind of family groups, if it is part, for instance, of the democratic process administration, if it is part of HR management or worker management, if it is part of the management of critical infrastructure, law enforcement, and so on and so forth, it is automatically classified as a high-risk system. Regardless of what the system is doing, it is automatically high risk. Then we have what we call the limited risk And this is just about systems that are potentially interacting with people. And here, the requirement is that the AI system, or basically the user, knows that it is interacting with an AI. This is why we call it transparency. So it needs to be transparent that the end user is interacting with machine. And then finally, we have the minimal risk use cases, and these are basically the simple ones, like the AI counting the beer in the fridge, for instance. So here is a summary of how exactly the EU AI Act classified the use cases, and here you see the requirements, or basically what is expected when you have such system. Obviously, for the first level, it is prohibited, so you're not allowed. And we have seen already the penalties associated with that. Then, if you are high risk, then obviously you need to go through conformity assessment. Depends on where you are, if you have need a notified body or not, so depends on the AI use case. And here, according to the analysis of the EU Commission, it's around 10 to 15% of the application would be high risk. So it's not very important. And this is again an argument for the people who say, no, the regulation would stall the innovation. It's not that much, because when you look at what is expected from the limited risk or the minimal risk, it's practically not much. So here you have just self-declaration or code of conduct, and here you have literally nothing to do. So it's only about this 10 to 15% where you need to fulfill certain requirements. Before you know what requirements you are supposed to fulfill, obviously you need to define or to know what is your role with regard to the AI system. And this is why the EU Act tried to give a kind of architecture, let's say, so that the users or the organization that, for this law would know which role exactly do I have with regard to the regulation. So for instance, you have providers, and these are entities that develop AI system and place them on the market under their own name or trademark. We have deployers, that are organizations that are using AI system in their own operations. We have importers and distributors, basically standard definition for organization, basically making sure that, bringing in AI systems to the EU. Product manufacturers are physical product manufacturers where AI is embedded, and represented authority representatives of providers are obviously like franchising, and the affected persons are basically someone who is affected by the regulation. So here the EU regulation tried to kind of divide, if you want, the supply chain and clarify who is doing what, so that basically according requirements would be defined for these roles. Still, I think that it is important, or how the regulation put this is responsibility shifts more towards the providers of these systems, right? So this is where most of the workload would happen. Obviously, you have the Article 16 in the regulation defining what exactly provider of a high-risk system needs to fulfill. And here we find more, I would say, strict requirements. It's around 10 requirements that needs to be fulfilled, but the most important ones, at least from our personal point of view, is the risk management. So for your AI systems, you need to do risk management. Quality management system, and this is obviously one of the topics of today, and how the ISO 42001 would play as a role in terms of quality management system, and human oversight, meaning that the humans should always have the upper hand above or on the AI system, especially if anything goes wrong. There are certain other requirements that might be a little bit more technical, like accuracy, robustness, cybersecurity, data governance, record keeping, and so on. But these are, things that we would be happy to elaborate on later if you have any questions on that. Then we have obviously the timeline. Where, when, what is happening? Obviously, the EU regulation is already into force. It came into force last year. in August, 1st of August 24, the regulation enforcement kicked off. Then in February this year, the first set of requirements came into force, and these are the prohibited requirements, meaning that now in the EU, you are not allowed to bring to market the use cases that we have mentioned, plus the AI literacy obligations that every organization needs to be training its people accordingly so that they know at least a kind of minimum baseline knowledge around AI. This they need to have. Then we have in August also this year, the GPI regulation requirements kicked off. And this is very important for the US since the biggest companies offering GPI models, so the OpenAI, Meta, XAI, so all of these are US organizations, and obviously they have, as far as I know, all of them has already signed the code of conduct for GPI, and they are basically entering under this the fulfillment of this regulation. Then next year, expected in August, with the high-risk applications requirement would kick off, and the year after, so in 27, the Annex 1 applications. So these are all the products containing AI, like NDR, AVDR, machinery, and so on. This will be kicked off in 27. All right, so this was mainly it from my side. Let's have a quick round for questions. So the question is, what do you see as the biggest driver for adopting ISO IEC 42001 in your organization? Is it the regulatory compliance and risk management, building trust and transparency in AI systems? You would say, no, it's rather competitive advantage and market differentiation, or finally, customer or stakeholder requirements. And I would be interested into hearing your answers here. Mm-hmm. So we are waiting for the results. I see the progress bar. Mm-hmm. Almost there. Mm-hmm. I think we still need some more time. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions concerning what we have been discussing so far, please don't hesitate to share this in the chat, and we would be happy to elaborate on the answers during the Q&A part. Hmm? Still waiting a bit for the results here, almost there. Mm-hmm. All right, so we have regulatory compliance and risk management, 62%, which is indeed very, very important, as we have just discussed, and we saw how this could be a big and important aspect for the UI. Then building trust, 24% advantage, around 7%, customer stakeholder requirements. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Let's move forward to the next one. It's about your opinion on the biggest challenge when it comes to the implementation of ISO IEC 42001. What do you think here? Is it kind of understanding and interpretation of the requirements? the integration with the existing management system that you currently have, you know, ISO 9001, SOC 2, 27001, buy-in and leadership backup, or the monitoring and the improvement of your ongoing AI systems. This one is also interesting. I would be interested into seeing the results here as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, almost there. So obviously 42.1 would be the focus of the next part that my colleague Ali would be presenting. So it is indeed very, very interesting to get your input here so that, you know, hopefully this will be mirrored during the next part. So let's see what comes out of this one. I think we still need just a couple of seconds. All right, so understanding and interpretation of the requirements around 41%. The integration into existing management systems around 31%, significant. Buy-in from leadership around 13%, and monitoring of or improvement of AI systems around 13%. It's very, very insightful. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And with this, I would pass to my colleague Ali to take over and basically take you in the journey around what TÜV SÜD is doing for 42.1. Ali, please.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I appreciate all your help. I just want to emphasize that Ibrahim is also sitting in those committees who are deciding with regard to EU AI Act as well as the ISO 42001. Today, I would like to try at least to simplify the messaging and understanding around that, because I think that there has been so many information going around that make everyone confused. So I try my very best in order to simplify the message, in a way that we can truly amplify our outcome. And the first thing that I would like to start, and we saw that also in the pools, that there is actually a multi-layer assurance model compass. So this is very insightful and important that we have an understanding about the regulatory framework, especially in Europe, about the management system certification, and about the product certification, because these three pillars are really distinct. And what does that mean? We talked about the EU AI Act. They are very similar acts and regulations in European Union within the Digital Europe 2030. To just name a few, there will be Cyber Resilience Act in 2027. Actually, there is a NIS2 regulation right now, NIS2 Directive, Network and Information Security. And those kind of regulatory compliance framework, they focus on ensuring legal compliance with mandatory obligation. The results should be presented. They are also typically driven by law rather than voluntary adaptation. And as Ibrahim indicated, conformity assessment or declaration of compliance is required before entering the regulated market. So they are considered as a barrier to market. I just want to also inform you about one very interesting topic that you may not heard before. As you know, we are a German company, deeply rooted in Germany and Europe. So we know a lot about what is going on in the lawmaking and also in the European Union. There is a fine distinction between act and directive in European Union. An act is an horizontal legal compliance institute, means that all the 27 or 20 plus countries that exist in European Union are subjected to the same act. As we talked about the EU AI Act, it is, if you go to Germany or if you go to Sweden or if you go to any country which is a member of the European Union, that act is exactly similar. So once you satisfy that, you're good to go with each and every European Union country. The regulatory environment in EU also defined a directive approach. Directive approach is a framework which is decided by European Union, but each country can have its adaptation in order to add or reduce the framework. NIS2 is one of them. So there is a fine line between an act and a directive there. But the most important question that I would like to answer is, you have also, management system certification, everything like 42001, 27001, and so on and so forth, 14001, 9001. These are system certification. They are definitely not product certification. They are voluntary based. And that certificate demonstrates that organizations follow structured and repeatable processes for all the products that it produces. Obviously, risk management is always a topic. That risk management part has been emphasized also by Ibrahim in his slide. However, we need to distinguish that intrinsically, complying and getting a certification for 42001 does not necessarily mean that you are fully compliant with EU AI Act. That is not the case. That standard builds trust, but is not a substitute for regulatory compliance, because a regulatory compliance is subjected to European Union laws, and they ask you to do a conformity assessment or declaration of compliance. It means that there is a delta here. We should not be under the impression that we do 42001 certification and then the EU Act is respected. You go with that maybe 85% or 90% of the way, and we will talk about the value and content of it, but it is not the 100% substitute. The other topic that I would like to just shortly touch is that a management system certification also does not substitute a product certification. So if you have a specific product and, for instance, a healthcare product or whatever, and you would like to bring it into European Union, and if it's subjected to regulations, having a system management certification does not satisfy that need. So please bear in mind this multi-layer assurance model, because that will accompany us in the years ahead. What I would like also, again, to emphasize are the challenges of a responsible AI. And I have some example that I will talk about it specifically with regard to accountability. We know that there are ethical concerns. Ibrahim touched based on that. We know that there is a problem with transparency and explainability, but accountability is also a topic. Now, I would like you just for a minute, forget about what we said about regulation and just focus on accountability topic. I have several cases listed here, and after this, I hope that you will get a slide deck so that you can go and just click on these cases to just read it for fun. because here in US, you have a complete new situation. There are many interesting examples that you can Google about it, but three of them really catched my eyes. There is a AI risk here for almost each and every company. And they are non-GDPR, because if we consider GDPR, there are companies in in Europe, that has been fined independent of the EU AI Act just because of the accountability in the courts for breaking the GDPR law. So all of these are non-GDPR and in US. Let me give you an example. There has been lawyers, all of us need attorneys, lawyers from case to case, if you have a car accident, whatever. So what happened here was that a attorney office, instead of going into their file cases and try to investigate, they used three chatbots, and they are good chatbots: CoCounsel, Westlaw Precision, and Google Gemini, in order to perform legal researches. And they did not check it, and then just put it in front of the judge, and the judge found that 1/3 of the citation were wrong. And so they end up to get sanctions severely, as well as fined $30,000 for that. So this is really a case that even without those regulatory environment here in US, there is and there will be much more cases with regard to accountability. There are other cases here that I have indicated with regard to airlines and how the hallucination of Air Canada caused also a case to be lost. You can take a look at it. It is interesting. These days, the accountability is really something that we are focusing. So I would like also, because we have only 13 minutes left, provide some information about the core of the 42001. Maybe this session will not be sufficient in order to, have a deep dive, but at least some core topic of it. First of all, 42001 provide a structured framework for what we call it AI management system. It is starting from the implementation. It is started from the basic, how you plan it, how you implement it, and also the entire life cycle up to the time point when you would like to retire that. So the entire cycle is in focus. And also, it definitely guide organization in order to managing the risk. Ibrahim talked about the risk management approach in EU AI Act. And so that is also the core message here. As a matter of fact, the core message within the 42001 is the risk assessment, risk mitigation, and also one new topic, which is impact assessment. And that impact assessment is how you influence humans, individuals, societies, or group of individuals. So that is something very new in that standard that has not been in other integrated in other similar standard. And the most important thing also is that if your organization has already a 27001, 9001, and something like that, 14001, that you are already doing what we call it a high-level structure. High-level structure is a framework that is respected within all ISO management systems. So it is an easy adaptation, and you don't need to start really from the beginning and reinvent the wheel. What I would like to indicate is that also the 42001 is very modular based. It means that it has identified and also dedicated controls to three main roles within the AI realm: AI provider, AI producer, and AI customer. it is a very good distinction because whatever rules designed for AI producer is not appropriate for AI customer. So they are tailoring that into 3 pillars. In order to clarify that, let me give you an example. Consider the ChatGPT. The ChatGPT is clearly an AI producer. However, Microsoft, within its Copilot, will be considered as an AI provider because they are integrating the ChatGPT into their products. And a customer, like any of us, can integrate that Copilot within our daily business. So you see, this is then distinct roles within the ISO 42001. However, the word outside is not black and white, it's gray. So there is a possibility that we have an organization with multiple roles because of multiple use cases. That freedom is also given. I have still some minutes. I hope I could grab some more in order to have a deep dive here, but I believe right now we can discuss about the, did somebody came out of mute?
Aline, we have 9 minutes left to the event, but we could go a little bit later, but just wanted to let you know so that we can leave a little bit of time for Q&A.
Okay, perfect. So thanks. The core components of ISO 42001 and how our auditor is looking to find artifacts. So I just want to touch base on that very short. What our auditors are looking for based on the 42001 standard is, first of all, see an AI governance and accountability. We talked about accountability. That is very important, that an AI policy is established there, that an oversight team, a governance team, really actually oversees what the results of the AI is. And more important, you should have roles and responsibilities, and the senior management should have also and in a certain interval review that AI policy. So that is very important. We talked about the AI risk impact assessment. That is the core. If you consider the AI governance as the brain, the AI risk and impact assessment is the heart of this 42001. Want to emphasize something. The AI risk is extremely broad. I had cybersecurity background, and I know that, for instance, in threat and risk assessment in cybersecurity is very detailed. However, here we are opening a reel which not only considers cybersecurity, but also safety, sustainability, and so on and so forth. So this is a huge topic, a huge task, and it should be detailed. The other topic is an impact assessment on human beings. So, you know, the entire 42001 is also human-centric. And so we need to have also some evidence that you have appropriate measures in order to remedy this. The other one is the data and AI security management. We talked about it, about cybersecurity, bombardment of vulnerability, and how the company is taking the leadership in order to remedy that. Human oversight and intervention, very important topic. You just saw 3 to 4 court cases with regard to that. So as a matter of fact, that is also, if I'm not mistaken, within EU AI Act, something which is for the critical systems needs to be respected. Resources lifecycle management, that is what we would like to see, that you have a secure, efficient, and sustainable AI operation throughout the entire life cycle. Development, implementation, retirement, and so on and so forth, especially with regard to the duration that you would like to have that system alive. We would like to see what kind of cybersecurity mitigation measures, safety mitigation measures and metrics all you're using. Also, one topic that has not been forgotten in 42001 is a third-party risk oversight. You are accountable for a product that you bring from the market. You cannot say, as you have seen in the court ruling, you cannot simply say that, ChatGPT hallucinated. That is not my problem. No, that is your problem. So the third-party risk oversight is extremely important. If you are integrating within your AI product anything coming from third party, you need to make sure that you have appropriate terms and conditions that once a vulnerability or an issue is found there, that is automatically also remediated in your product. So that is very critical, as we saw before. Now, the list continues with regard to incident management and how you communicate that. Obviously, every technology has its own incident management and communication. However, with AI, we are coming into a new era, and that era is we had deterministic technologies. If you consider cybersecurity, for instance, if either you have firewalls with appropriate firewall rules or you don't, and then you go there. But AI is non-deterministic. And so the incident volume and incident management is very critical there. Our auditors would like to see a process there. Management review and continuous improvement, it is a topic that is clear, I believe, for the audience. Very important, sustainability and climate change. You know that we are in the age of AI, and AI is consuming a lot of energy in data centers whatsoever. There is two strict indication in the 42001 with regard to that. What measures are you integrating in order to support sustainability to align with official governance? It's more in EU, less here in US, and also being also ethical there as a responsible, product. There are 4 annexes, and they are really great annexes in that, 42001 standard. Those annexes are substantially different from 27001, because if you just consider 27001, you have a list of controls which are very clear. Because of the AI and the fact that it is not deterministic, those are not 0 and 1. Those are these annexes are more like a roadmap for you. So it is great to take a look at it because that is appropriate guidance. Let me give you an example. In Annex A and Annex B, where in Annex A, you will have a guide to build AI system, and Annex B, where it provides an action item with regard to the controls, you will see passages like, okay, you should have an AI governance team with an appropriate AI policy. And then in Annex B, it says, okay, our suggestion for AI governance is to integrate these roles, and our suggestion for AI policy is to integrate these kind of policies. Remember, you're talking about a high-level structure. This is something which is not new. It is integrated already in the 27001, in the 9001, 14001, 27017, and so on and so forth. However, it has a different perspective than those what we see till now. It has more like a freedom to coordinate between your targets and action plan. So,
Haley, sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind you it's 1 minute before the top of the hour. So I know you have quite a few slides, so maybe we could wrap it up. And then in terms of the questions, we're getting quite a few questions. So we will, please submit your questions on the Q&A tab, and we will prepare a written questions with answers document to address all the questions coming in. Sorry to interrupt, Ali.
No worries. I believe that we need to have a 42001 specific webinar later. Just want to maybe 40-second explain the certification process. And so if a company would like to proceed with the 42001, the first thing that we will do is to send you a questionnaire. Based upon the questionnaire, our really great experts will take a look at those infrastructure, your roles as we discussed, and then prepare a quotation. We will plan audit together. The audit will be in 2 stages. Stage 1, which we just ask you about, do you have all of the documentation ready? And then if the answers to that, typically it is 1 day, if you provide all the information, then there will be a stage 2 audit. In a stage 2 audit, we go through all of those documents that provide, ask questions, and then if you find deviation, you will have some time in order to remedy those deviations. Once the deviation is done, then you will get the certification. Those certification are valid. I mean, the certification is valid 1 year and is subjected to surveillance audit. Surveillance audit can be repeated for 2 years, and at the end, you will have a certification with the surveillance audit with a validity of 3 years. After the 3rd year, we need to do the certification again. 2 very important topics. We are one of the biggest companies in the world that provide up to now, and after 4 months of releasing 42006, 22 projects worldwide. And the second question, which is very important, I truly encourage all the participants before starting 42001 and starting the certification, do an internal audit. You should do an internal audit. Download a copy of 42001. I think it's between $500 to $600 to download it and purchase it. Go through it, ask a consultant probably to support you. The final step will be the certification. Thank you very much for your time, and I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Ibram. Yeah, we're a little bit over time, but thank you all who submitted questions on the Q&A tab, and we will prepare a written questions and answers document. And I think people have asked, are we recording this? Yes, we are recording. We will send the recording very soon after the event. So thanks again, Ali and Ibram, and everyone participating on today's webinar. We truly appreciate it. Also, stay on a few minutes to complete the survey questions. If you don't mind, that really helps us gauge how you like the webinar today and helps us plan future webinars. So please stay on and complete the survey. So thank you so much again for joining. Visit TÜVSÜD.com to learn more about the EU AI Act and also ISO 42001. So thanks again, Ali and Ibram. Thanks so much for joining. And thanks everyone today.